What's worse than being cheated on? Maybe it's finding out the cheater's parents are actually on your side. What started as heartbreak turned into the most unexpected alliance I could ever imagine, and together, we orchestrated a revenge plan that will absolutely shock you. You won't believe how these parents helped me turn the tables. The scent of jasmine from our bedroom window used to calm my nerves after long days at the marketing firm. Now it made me nauseous. I stared at the phone in my trembling hands, watching the video that my best friend Sophia had sent me with a simple message: "Celeste, I'm so sorry you have to see this." There he was, Trevor Blackwood, my boyfriend of 3 years, the man I'd been planning a future with, locked in a passionate embrace with someone I recognized immediately. Vanessa Chen, his colleague from the architecture firm where he worked. They weren't just kissing, they were completely lost in each other, oblivious to the world around them at what looked like some upscale hotel bar downtown. My chest felt like it was caving in. The phone slipped from my hands and clattered onto our hardwood floor, the same floor we'd spent an entire weekend installing together just last month, laughing as we measured and cut each plank with meticulous care. I don't remember the exact moment I stopped breathing, but suddenly I was gasping, hyperventilating in our shared bedroom. Our bedroom. The irony wasn't lost on me. The photos on the nightstand seemed to mock me, snapshots of happier times when I believed in us, when I thought we were building something real. Trevor wasn't supposed to be home for another 2 hours. He'd told me he was working late on the Henderson project, a massive commercial development that had been consuming his time for weeks. Apparently, the only thing consuming his time was Vanessa Chen. I replayed every recent interaction, every "I'll be late tonight" text, every distracted kiss goodbye. The signs had been there, hadn't they? The way he'd started going to the gym more often, the new cologne, the phone calls he'd take in the other room. I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid, that the stress from my recent promotion was making me overthink everything. The front door clicked open downstairs. "Celeste? I'm home." Trevor's voice carried up the stairs with that same cheerful tone he'd used for 3 years. The tone I'd fallen in love with. The tone that now made my skin crawl. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, each one driving a nail deeper into the coffin of our relationship. When he appeared in the doorway, that familiar smile on his lips, I felt something break inside me that I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. "Hey, beautiful. How was your day?" He moved toward me, arms outstretched for our usual evening embrace. I stepped back, my voice barely a whisper. "How long?" The smile faded from his face, replaced by confusion that looked almost genuine. "How long what?" I picked up my phone and showed him the video. Watched as his face went through a spectrum of emotions: confusion, recognition, panic, and finally, resignation. "Celeste, I can explain." "How long?" I repeated, each word sharp as broken glass. He sat heavily on the edge of our bed, head in his hands. 4 months. 4 months. 4 months of lies, of me planning our future while he was planning his exit strategy. 4 months of me feeling guilty for questioning his late nights and weekend work sessions. "I never meant for it to happen," he said, the most cliché line in the Cheater's Handbook. "It just evolved. The project brought us together, and Vanessa and I, we just clicked in a way that..." "Get out." The words came from somewhere deep inside me, somewhere I didn't recognize. "Celeste, please, we can work through this." "Get out." I screamed, my voice echoing off the walls we'd painted together in soft lavender because it was both our favorite color. He left that night, claiming he needed space to think, taking only a small bag of clothes. I spent the next 3 days in our apartment, crying until I had no tears left, eating nothing but ice cream and rage, calling in sick to work with a stomach bug that was actually a heart bug, a complete system failure of trust and love. The call came on a Thursday morning while I was still in my pajamas, contemplating whether I had the energy to shower or if dry shampoo would suffice for another day. The number on my phone was familiar but unexpected: Trevor's mother, Eleanor Blackwood. I almost let it go to voicemail. Eleanor had always been polite to me, but we'd never had what you'd call a close relationship. She was one of those perfectly put-together women who made me feel like my nail polish was always slightly chipped and my small talk never quite sophisticated enough. Against my better judgment, I answered. Celeste, dear. Her voice was different, softer, almost fragile. I hope you don't mind me calling. I know this is probably the last thing you want to deal with right now. Mrs. Blackwood, I managed, my voice still hoarse from days of crying. How are you? Oh, sweetheart. I heard her take a shaky breath. I'm absolutely mortified. We just found out about what Trevor did. What he's been doing. That meant Trevor's father, Robert, knew too. The distinguished bank president who'd always treated me with formal kindness at family dinners, asking about my career and nodding approvingly when I talked about my goals. He told you? I asked, surprised. Trevor had never been particularly close with his parents, always complaining that they were too busy with their social obligations to pay attention to his life. He didn't have to. Vanessa Chen's mother is in my book club. The world suddenly felt very small. Mrs. Chen was absolutely beside herself at our meeting yesterday, Eleanor continued. Apparently, Vanessa came clean to her parents about the affair, thinking they'd support her decision to follow her heart. The disdain in Eleanor's voice was unmistakable. Instead, they were horrified. Mrs. Chen was in tears, apologizing profusely for her daughter's behavior and asking if there was anything she could do to help you through this. I sat down heavily on my couch, trying to process this information. I don't understand. Celeste, dear, would you be willing to meet with Robert and me? I know it's an unusual request, but we feel we owe you a conversation. More than that, actually. We owe you an apology and perhaps we can help each other. 2 hours later, I found myself sitting in the Blackwoods' pristine living room, a cup of Eleanor's perfectly brewed tea cooling in my hands while I tried to make sense of the conversation I was having. We raised Trevor to be better than this, Robert said, his usually commanding voice heavy with disappointment. His behavior is a reflection on us as parents, and more importantly, it's inexcusable treatment of someone we've come to care about deeply. Eleanor nodded emphatically. You've been nothing but wonderful to our son, Celeste. You've supported his career, you've been patient with his moods, you've included us in your life despite Trevor's tendency to keep us at arm's length. And this is how he repays your loyalty? We want you to know, Robert added, that we don't support his decision. We've told him as much. I set down my teacup with shaking hands. What exactly are you saying? Eleanor and Robert exchanged a look, one of those married couple communications that happen without words. We're saying, Eleanor said carefully, that sometimes actions have consequences. And sometimes those consequences need a little assistance to manifest properly. What followed was the most surreal conversation of my life. These two pillars of community respectability, Eleanor with her charity galas and Robert with his bank board meetings, were essentially proposing we team up to ensure Trevor and Vanessa faced appropriate consequences for their actions. Now, we're not talking about anything illegal or truly harmful, Robert clarified, adjusting his reading glasses. But public accountability? Social consequences? Professional ramifications that arise naturally from their choices? Those seem entirely reasonable. Eleanor pulled out a notebook that looked suspiciously like she'd been planning this conversation. We've given this considerable thought, dear. Trevor and Vanessa have been remarkably careless about their affair. They seem to believe they're entitled to happiness at any cost, including the cost of your pain and betrayal of trust. What did you have in mind? I asked, feeling like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole. Well, Eleanor began, Trevor's firm is very family-oriented. The partners are all traditional men who value loyalty and stability. They particularly frown upon employees who create drama that could reflect poorly on the company. And Vanessa, Robert added, is up for a promotion to senior architect. The decision committee includes several people who know us personally and professionally. people who value discretion and moral character. I stared at them. You want to sabotage their careers? Oh no, dear, Eleanor said with a sweet smile that was absolutely terrifying. We want to make sure their employers have all the relevant information about their employees' character and judgment. What happens after that is entirely up to the companies. The plan they outlined was methodical and devastating in its simplicity. Eleanor had connections throughout their social circle, the country club, the charity boards, the professional networks that form the backbone of any mid-sized city's business community. Robert's position at the bank meant he interacted regularly with most of the major employers in town. The beauty of it, Eleanor explained, is that we're not doing anything vindictive. We're simply ensuring that the truth comes to light in the appropriate circles. But what about Trevor? I asked. He's your son. Robert's jaw tightened. He's also a grown man who made his choices. Eleanor and I believe in consequences for actions. We've tried to raise Trevor with strong moral values, but clearly, we failed somewhere along the way. Maybe experiencing real consequences will help him develop the character he should have had all along. Eleanor reached across the coffee table and took my hand. More importantly, dear, you don't deserve to be the only one suffering from his selfishness. You've lost your relationship, your living situation, your sense of trust. Meanwhile, he gets to move on with his new romance without any real repercussions? That hardly seems fair. The plan unfolded over 2 carefully orchestrated weeks. Eleanor, it turned out, was a master strategist who'd honed her skills through decades of charity fundraising and social event planning. Every move was calculated, every conversation seemingly innocent while delivering maximum impact. Phase 1 began with Eleanor's book club meeting. Mrs. Chen was still mortified about her daughter's behavior and eager to make amends. Together, they crafted a plan to ensure that the affair became known within their professional circles, not through malicious gossip, but through concerned conversations about professional conduct and workplace relationships. You see, Eleanor explained to me over lunch at the country club, Mrs. Chen and I simply expressed our concerns to a few mutual friends about workplace romances and how they can create complicated situations. We mentioned how sorry we felt for you, of course, and how difficult it must be to have a relationship end because of office dynamics. Meanwhile, Robert was handling the financial sector connections. Trevor's firm had been courting Robert's bank for a major construction loan on their next development project. During their preliminary meetings, Robert made sure to mention his disappointment in the firm's apparent lack of oversight regarding employee relationships and professional conduct. I wasn't specific, Robert assured me. I simply expressed concern about the firm's culture and whether they maintained appropriate standards for their employees' professional behavior. Banking is built on trust, after all, and we need to be sure our partners share our values. Phase 2 involved documentation. Eleanor and Mrs. Chen had compiled a surprisingly comprehensive timeline of Trevor and Vanessa's public appearances together, restaurant receipts from romantic dinners, paid for with Trevor's credit card while he was supposedly working late, hotel reservations for weekend getaways, booked under Vanessa's name but charged to Trevor's account, and even social media posts where they'd been tagged together at various events. Modern technology makes it remarkably easy to piece together a story when people aren't being careful, Eleanor noted with satisfaction. They were so confident in their secrecy that they never considered how their digital footprints might connect. The breakthrough came when Eleanor discovered that Trevor and Vanessa had been using the conference room at his architecture firm for their romantic interludes. A friend of hers, whose daughter worked as a night cleaner in the building, mentioned seeing the same couple in the office multiple times after hours, usually accompanied by wine bottles and takeout containers that certainly weren't consistent with overtime work. That's when we knew we had everything we needed, Eleanor told me. Using company property for personal relationships, especially romantic ones that violate workplace conduct policies? That's the kind of liability issue that makes partners very nervous. Phase 3 was the revelation. Eleanor arranged for the compiled evidence to reach the right people through carefully orchestrated channels. Mrs. Chen's sister, who worked in HR at a competing architecture firm, mentioned the situation to her professional network as an example of workplace conduct issues. Robert's golf partner, who happened to be on the board of Trevor's firm, received an anonymous package of documentation with a note expressing concern about employee behavior that could reflect poorly on the company. The timing was perfect. Trevor's firm was in the middle of their annual partnership review, and Vanessa was scheduled for her promotion interview the following week. The first domino fell on a Monday morning. Trevor called me, his voice panicked and confused. "Celeste, I don't know what's happening, but somehow the partners at my firm found out about Vanessa and me. They're saying I violated workplace conduct policies by using company resources for personal relationships. They're threatening disciplinary action, maybe even termination." I felt a surge of satisfaction that surprised me with its intensity. "That's terrible, Trevor. How do you think they found out?" "I have no idea. Someone sent them photos and receipts and all kinds of documentation. It's like someone's been following us or something. It's creepy and invasive." And he paused. You wouldn't do something like this, would you?" "Trevor," I said calmly, "I've been too busy trying to put my life back together to worry about yours. Maybe you should focus on dealing with the consequences of your choices instead of looking for someone to blame." The second domino fell 2 days later. Vanessa's promotion was not only denied, but she was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into her professional conduct. It turned out that using company resources for personal relationships was explicitly against firm policy, and the evidence was too comprehensive to ignore. Eleanor kept me updated through our daily phone calls, which had become a surprising highlight of my days. Vanessa tried to claim discrimination, she reported with obvious satisfaction. But when they showed her the evidence of after-hours office use, company credit card charges for romantic dinners, and travel receipts for weekend getaways during supposed work trips, she couldn't deny the facts. "What about Trevor?" I asked. "Oh, his situation is quite serious. Apparently, the Henderson project he was supposedly working so hard on? Most of those late nights were actually romantic dinners with Vanessa, billed to the client as overtime work. That's considered fraud, dear. His firm is deciding whether to terminate him or just demote him significantly." The third domino was social. Eleanor's network had been busy, and the story of Trevor and Vanessa's affair had spread through their professional and social circles like wildfire. Not as malicious gossip, but as a cautionary tale about professional conduct and personal integrity. "It's remarkable how quickly people distance themselves from scandal," Eleanor observed. "Trevor and Vanessa are finding that their social invitations have dried up, their professional networking opportunities have vanished, and their reputations have been significantly damaged." Robert added his own observations during our weekly dinner, a tradition that had developed as the three of us bonded over our shared mission. The banking community is quite small, and word travels fast about reliability and trustworthiness. Trevor's chances of finding another position at his level in this city have become limited. Within a month, the consequences had spread far beyond what any of us had anticipated. Trevor's firm decided to terminate his employment after the client fraud investigation confirmed that he had been billing personal time as work hours. Vanessa was ultimately let go as well, though she managed to negotiate a resignation instead of termination. But the professional consequences were just the beginning. Their social circle, young professionals who valued networking and reputation, began excluding them from events and gatherings. The story had become a whispered warning about the dangers of workplace affairs and the importance of maintaining professional integrity. "What's particularly satisfying," Eleanor confided during one of our lunch dates, "is that they're experiencing exactly what you went through, but in reverse. While you were dealing with the private pain of betrayal, they're dealing with the public embarrassment of exposure. While you were questioning your worth and value, they're facing questions about their character and judgment." The most unexpected consequence came when Trevor and Vanessa's relationship couldn't survive the pressure. According to Eleanor's sources, and by this point, her intelligence network was impressively comprehensive, they began blaming each other for the exposure and the consequences. The romance that had seemed worth destroying other relationships crumbled under the weight of real-world accountability. Apparently, Eleanor reported with obvious satisfaction. Vanessa accused Trevor of being careless and leaving a trail that led to their discovery. Trevor, meanwhile, claimed that Vanessa was too aggressive about pursuing the relationship and taking risks that exposed them both. Neither of them wants to take responsibility for their choices. They broke up 6 weeks after their affair was exposed, each of them facing unemployment and social isolation in a city where their reputation had been permanently damaged. 3 months after that devastating phone call from Trevor, I was sitting in my new apartment, a bright, modern space with large windows and a view of the city park, having dinner with Eleanor and Robert. What had started as a revenge partnership had evolved into a genuine friendship that none of us had expected. "I have news," I announced, raising my glass of wine. "I got the promotion." Eleanor clapped her hands together. "Oh, wonderful. Senior Marketing Director?" "With a 20% raise and my own team," I confirmed. Turns out that focusing all my energy on work instead of worrying about Trevor's late nights was actually quite productive. Robert nodded approvingly. Success is the best revenge, as they say. Though I must admit, our little project was quite satisfying as well. "What about Trevor and Vanessa?" I asked. "Any updates?" Eleanor's smile was particularly mischievous. "Well, Trevor moved back in with his college roommate in the next city over. He found a job at a much smaller firm for significantly less money. Vanessa moved back in with her parents and is working as a freelance draftswoman while she looks for a new position." "Do you ever feel bad about it?" I asked. "About what we did?" Robert and Eleanor exchanged one of their married couple looks. "Dear," Eleanor said gently, "we didn't create their problems. We simply made sure their choices had appropriate consequences. They made the decision to have an affair, to use company resources inappropriately, to lie to their employers and their families. We just ensured that those decisions weren't consequence-free. Besides," Robert added, "look at what you've accomplished since then. You've gotten promoted, moved into a beautiful new place, developed new friendships. You've thrived. Meanwhile, they're dealing with the natural results of their poor choices. That seems entirely appropriate to me." As I sat there with these two unlikely allies, I realized they were right. The revenge hadn't been about destroying Trevor and Vanessa, it had been about restoring balance. For months, I had been the only one suffering from their selfish decisions. Now they were experiencing consequences while I was building a better life. The most surprising outcome of the entire situation was the relationship I'd developed with Eleanor and Robert. What had started as a practical alliance had grown into a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared values. "You know," Eleanor said one evening as we walked through the botanical gardens, "I always liked you, Celeste, but I never really got to know you when you were with Trevor. He kept you at arm's length from us, I think because he knew we'd see how much better you were than him." "That's not fair to Trevor," I protested, though my heart wasn't really in the defense. "Isn't it?" Robert asked. "Think about it. He never included you in family events unless absolutely necessary. He never encouraged you to develop relationships with us independently. He kept you separate from his family life, and now I suspect it was because he knew we'd recognize your worth and question why he wasn't treating you better." Looking back, I realized they were right. Trevor had always found excuses for why I couldn't join family gatherings, why I shouldn't get too involved with his parents' social circles, why it was better to keep family and romantic relationships separate. I thought he was protecting our independence as a couple, but really he'd been preventing me from forming connections that might have shown me what I deserved. "Well," Eleanor said, linking her arm through mine, "you're stuck with us now. Robert and I have decided we're adopting you as an honorary family. We're much better at being your family than we ever were at being Trevor's parents anyway." And strangely enough, that felt exactly right. 6 months later, as I prepared for a work trip to New York that would likely lead to another promotion, I reflected on the entire experience. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been liberating in ways I never could have anticipated. I'd learned that I was stronger than I thought, more resilient than I'd given myself credit for, and deserving of relationships built on respect and loyalty rather than convenience and habit. I'd discovered that sometimes the people who support you most aren't the ones you expect, and that family can be chosen as well as inherited. Most importantly, I'd learned that revenge, when done thoughtfully and proportionally, isn't about destruction, it's about justice. Trevor and Vanessa hadn't been destroyed by our actions, they'd experienced the natural consequences of their choices in an accelerated time frame. They could rebuild their lives and careers if they chose to learn from their mistakes and make better decisions going forward. Eleanor called as I was packing for my trip. "How are you feeling, dear?" "Grateful," I answered honestly. "For the experience, for what I learned about myself, and especially for the friendship with you and Robert. I never would have expected any of this 6 months ago." "Neither would we," she laughed. "But sometimes the best outcomes come from the most unexpected circumstances." "Are you nervous about the New York opportunity?" "Excited," I corrected. "For the first time in years, I feel like I'm moving towards something instead of just trying to maintain what I already have." "That's the difference between a life lived with integrity and one built on deception," Eleanor said. "You're building something real now, something that belongs entirely to you." As I hung up the phone and finished packing, I caught my reflection in the bedroom mirror of my apartment. I looked different than I had 6 months ago, more confident, more self-assured, more genuinely happy. The woman staring back at me was someone who had survived betrayal, orchestrated justice, and built a better life from the ashes of a relationship that had never really served her. Trevor had done me a favor, really, though I doubted he'd see it that way. His infidelity had freed me to discover who I was without him, what I was capable of achieving on my own, and what kind of relationships actually added value to my life. The revenge had been sweet, but the life I'd built afterward was even sweeter. 1 year later, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. At first glance, I thought it might be from Eleanor and Robert, renewing their vows for their 35th anniversary as they'd been discussing. But when I opened it, I found something much more unexpected. It was from Mrs. Chen, Vanessa's mother. She was inviting me to her daughter's wedding, to a man she'd met during her professional recovery period, someone who'd helped her rebuild her career and her reputation in a new city. The invitation included a handwritten note: "Dear Celeste, I know this might seem strange, but Vanessa specifically asked me to invite you. She wanted you to know that the consequences she faced, while difficult, helped her become a better person. She's grateful for the lessons she learned and hopes you've found happiness as well. We would be honored if you would join us in celebrating her new beginning." I RSVP'd yes. At the wedding, Vanessa approached me during the cocktail hour, looking genuinely happy and more mature than I remembered. "Celeste," she said, "I owe you an apology. Not just for the affair, but for being the kind of person who could justify hurting someone else for my own happiness. The past year has been difficult, but it taught me things about myself that I needed to learn." "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "I hope you're truly happy." "I am," she said simply. "And I hope you are too." As I watched her rejoin her new husband, I realized that our revenge plot had accomplished something none of us had anticipated. It had forced everyone involved to become better versions of themselves. Trevor had learned that actions have consequences, Vanessa had developed genuine remorse and self-reflection, and I had discovered my own strength and worth. Eleanor and Robert had learned that sometimes being good parents means holding your children accountable for their choices, even when it's painful. And I had learned that the best revenge isn't about punishment, it's about creating a life so fulfilling that the betrayal becomes just another chapter in a much larger, much better story. The jasmine in my new apartment smells like possibility now, not nausea. And that, perhaps, is the sweetest victory of all.